Good evening, and welcome to Future Energy. Please take your seats. I'd now like to introduce the president of the Stanford Energy Club, Amit Desai.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. Hopefully you all had something to eat and drink. This is Future Energy. Stanford Energy Club is working with ultralight startups to put this event together. Just want to say a few thank yous up front, tell you what this event's about, and then hand it over to our MCs. So just want to give a shout out to the Stanford Graduate School Business Center for Social Innovation, who supported us in helping to put this event on, the Tomcat Center, as well as the Stanford Steyer-Taylor Center for Energy Policy and Finance, and then of course our platinum sponsors for the evening, Shell GameChanger. This is the conclusion of Stanford Energy Week. In case you guys aren't aware, we've been doing a 7-day program here at Stanford, part of Stanford Energy Week, and this event is sort of the end of it. And so we're really excited that this is the way we can cap things off. If you guys have any comments or feedback on the event, please use the Twitter hashtag there. Here's tonight's agenda. We'll do some quick intros of our expert panel and our MCs. We'll have 8 startup pitches tonight. We'll have a voting contest here. Audience voting, and then we'll be convening for some drinks afterwards. So I'd like to introduce our expert panel for tonight. We're very fortunate to have a breadth of experience and expertise on this panel. First, I'd like to introduce John Freer from GE Global Research. He's going to be offering us some perspectives from large corporate, and GE is a brand that's known around the world. Next, I'd like to introduce Ryan Kottenstette from Khosla Ventures, GSB alum, supporter of the Stanford Energy Club, and Khosla Ventures is very active in looking at companies in this space. Next, we have Brook Porter from Kleiner, Perkins, Caufield, and Byers, another flagship brand in terms of this sector and having depth in investing in this space for quite some time now. Next is Dan Reicher, who's the director of the Steyer-Taylor Center. He comes from a government background as well as an investment background, and is going to be able to provide, is also here at Stanford, so I'm sure he's supporting those teams. And finally, Willem Rensink from the Shell GameChanger program. So you don't associate Shell traditionally with small-scale, early-stage technologies, but they've been great to work with and are looking at a lot of interesting early-stage technologies. So we're very grateful to have them here and have their support. So now I'd like to introduce our MCs, Graham Lawler and Chris DeLuca from Ultralight Startups, and they are going to run the show tonight. So hope you all enjoy.
Thank you very much, Amit. Our appearance here tonight is the culmination of probably close to a year's worth of work with Amit. I know he's had a vision for Stanford Energy Week and the Stanford Energy Club's participation in that and leadership of that. And Amit has done a fantastic job pulling this together, and we're really honored to be here this evening with you. So my name is Graham Lawler, and I'm the founder of Ultralight Startups, which produces Future Energy. I'm here with my partner, Chris DeLuca, co-founder of Ultralight, and you'll be hearing from him shortly. So I would also like to echo Amit's thanks to the Graduate School of Business and the Center for Social Innovation for hosting us here tonight, and also the Steyer-Taylor Center and the Tomcat Center as well. So Ultralight Startups connects corporations with startups, and we host in-person pitch events, much like the one you'll see tonight. And we also produce an online community for startups to connect with investors and with corporations as well. We do this mainly in New York City and in Boston, where we've been for about 5 years. We've produced over 120 pitch events, much like the one you'll see tonight. We're the largest pitch event community organization in New York and in Boston. This is our first time on the West Coast, so we are thrilled to be here and thankful for the Stanford Energy Club to invite us to produce Future Energy for you today. So we'll tell you a little bit about the companies that you're going to see. So you'll see 8 companies present today. There were 124 startups that applied to present, so applied for these 8 spots. From those 124, we filtered based on early stage companies only. We only wanted to see companies that have not raised any venture capital yet. So just emerging from laboratories and research. Of those early stage companies, we ran a crowd voting contest where anybody on the internet could view these companies and vote for the ones that they wanted to see here. The two companies that got the most votes on our crowd voting website got automatic spots to pitch. The other 6 were picked by our selection committee. There are 5 Stanford affiliated teams here. And we tried to pick a cross section of technologies. So something from solar, something from wind, something from biofuels, oil and gas, storage, across the spectrum of energy. And all of the 8 companies that you see here received coaching from our professional pitch coach. I'd also like to give a shout out to a couple of Bay Area communities that were very helpful and influential in bringing these 124 companies to us, and in particular, University of California, Berkeley, a number of communities there, Brook, the Berkeley Energy and Resource Collaborative, Citrus and B-Plan in particular were all very helpful. 2 other Bay Area communities, Young Professionals in Energy and Green Biz, very helpful in bringing companies here today. So Chris now is going to talk about the pitch format.
Thank you, Graham. So the format for tonight, as Graham mentioned, we have 8 companies presenting. The format for each company presenting will be 3 minutes of pitch, straight to the panel and straight to you. This is a 3-minute stop. We'll stop them at that point. Then they're moving into 3 minutes of question and answer. This is an interactive session between the panel who will be asking questions, giving the presenter a chance to respond. And then 3 minutes of advice from the panel. So we're asking the panel to put themselves in the shoes of the entrepreneur, think about what they would do, when they wake up. If you were to wake up the next day as the entrepreneur, what would you do to send them off and grow their company to the next level? So this is very actionable feedback for the entrepreneurs to take away. And just to be clear, the panel is not actually judging the companies tonight. That's where we need your help. So you're going to be actually helping us vote for the top companies. Around 8 o'clock, you'll receive an email from Graham. It's going to be in the format of a SurveyMonkey form, so have your mobile phones ready. You'll be able to access the form, vote on your favorite companies, as well as your favorite panelists. So there's a couple of competitions going on tonight. It's going to get very heated. So there's an on-stage competition. If you hear something you like, make sure you grab a program so you can take notes, keep track of the companies and the panelists, so you can vote and help them decide who's the best winner. And what are they competing for? Well, we have some great prizes. We have a complimentary application to Clean Tech Open. Also, Surge Accelerator is providing an interview that's based in Houston. And then $1,000 of credit to Amazon Web Services. And of course, the real prize, the Audience Choice Award. So, Graham, would you like to present the first company?
Absolutely. So first up, we have Aaswath Raman of radCool. So Aaswath, whenever you're ready, you have 3 minutes.
All right. Thank you. My name is Aaswath, and I'm from radCool. Global demand for air conditioning and cooling more generally is growing at an incredibly rapid pace, especially in the developing world. So I'm very excited today to be able to talk to you about a new technology and invention we've developed here at Stanford that enables passive cooling that is without electricity during the hottest hours of the day and at the hottest times of the year. Now, we do this using something called a radiative cooling surface. This is a surface, if left alone, will actually go to a temperature below the ambient. Now, how does this surface actually work? Well, the first and most important thing it does is it actually takes the heat from the building and transmits it to the cold of outer space in the form of thermal electromagnetic radiation. So it's basically using the cold of outer space as a resource, as a heat sink. Now, because we want this to operate during the hottest hours of the day, at the same time, it's a very good reflector of sunlight. So what's exciting about this is that it's passive, meaning it has no electrical components and there are no moving parts. We can make this using common, abundant materials and scalable manufacturing techniques like photolithography, thin film deposition, and roll-to-roll processing. From a performance point of view, what's particularly exciting about this is that we can now, for the first time, achieve 100 watts per meter squared of cooling power passively, that is without the need for electricity. So to put that into context, if you cover half the rooftop of your typical one-story residential home in the United States, you could cut air conditioning needs and costs by 75% in July or August. And compared to competing passive technologies like white roofs, we don't just reflect sunlight, we actually take the heat away from the building and send it to the cold of outer space. The next slide. So thinking about this from a business point of view, we're very excited about the opportunity to tackle industrial scale cooling. In industries like oil and gas and in data centers, there are fluids whose temperatures need to be stepped down in temperature. Now, right now, companies like GE, for example, have air-cooled heat exchangers, and other data centers use regular heat exchangers. We believe this technology can be complementary and make existing heat exchangers more efficient or serve as a substitute. We also think that there's a market in electric vehicles, where by reducing air conditioning needs in the summer, we can extend battery range. Finally, and also something that I'm personally also very excited about, is the possibility of opening new markets for cooling where there's no power right now. Now, these are rural, off-grid, and developing world locations where refrigeration isn't possible right now, but the modular, passive nature of our technology fundamentally enables cooling where you can't do it right now. So we have a patent pending, and along with my lab mate and professor, we recently received $400,000 in funding from RPE. So we hope to have our prototype done by the end of the year and scale to market, and hopefully in 2 years afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move straight into I ask you to hold your applause. We're going to move straight into the question and answer section, and we can save your applause for the conclusion of the feedback. So, John, what would you like to ask of Aaswath to get a little more information?
I'd like to ask, do you have an estimate on the cost per meter squared in order to manufacture this? It sounds like, I'm assuming a quantum dot or a phosphor or something, so how do you think the costs that you're going to see are manageable in the context of a residential cooling?
So there are a number of different ways of actually developing the technology. We're initially going for high performance, but we think this should be competitive, at least as cheap or cheaper than solar. So if you're thinking 50 cents a watt for solar, like a solar panel, $50 for 100 watts per meter square. That's kind of the framework we're thinking in right now.
Okay. Question, Ryan?
Sure, there's plenty to touch on the economics. It seems like if you're delivering cooling as opposed to electricity and you're, at about $100, so, sorry, 100 watts per square meter versus incident solar, just looking at 1,000 watts a square meter, that opens a lot of questions about the economics, which I'd want to go to in detail. But setting that aside, I'd love to understand the technology constraints. For example, can you access black body during cloud cover? What are the constraints on dissipating heat?
So performance will degrade if there's cloud cover, but you can still achieve some substantial amount of cooling. What's particularly interesting, we think, are things like desert and very hot climates where there's not a lot of cloud cover and you're already very hot, because this is something that works very well when there's a clear sky, which is in some of the hottest places in the world.
Sure. It'd be interesting to look at how that intermittency affects what you can do with this. So granted, the desert doesn't have a lot of cloud cover, but if you have it 2 days a year, if you have to size the rest of your system to deliver your necessary cooling load, that's something we have to think about.
Okay.
Question from Brook?
Yeah, so solid state cooling is a huge opportunity, a big idea that we could get excited about, mainly because it can reduce the maintenance costs. And so I'm curious with this system, is this purely a conductive heat transfer plus sort of convection inside of the building? Or do you actually have to move air as well through the building? So 2 questions on maintenance and lifetime. One on the actual photonics and how long that might last, what your estimates are on lifetime. Yep. And then do you actually have to couple it with a mechanical system to move air, or is it purely?
So there's, the kind of system we envision, the actual panel itself is radiating the heat away. So that's the radiative heat transfer component. And the constraints on that, I think, are similar to solar panels in terms of lifetimes. It will have to be encapsulated in some way, sealed off. But unlike solar, there's no electrical problem here, so I anticipate lifetimes can be quite long on the decades level. But you'd want to couple this either to some sort of, in the case of data centers, kind of water fluid channel. That's the actual taking the heat from inside the building, say the servers, and coming into conductive contact with this cool surface that lies on the rooftop of the building.
Have you thought about how you would make those systems so they'd be as reliable as your?
Well, a lot of buildings already have this component, a lot of in particular industries. So this would be simply, instead of having that heat exchanger on top of the building, substituting this in or putting this in before the water enters, or the fluid or gas enters the existing heat exchanger.
Question, Dan.
You talked about both radiative and reflective components of this. I was not clear on the relative proportion in the sort of the most optimum application of this. What's the relative proportion of cooling that you're going to get from one versus the other?
So the reflective part, the way to think about it is that if your radiative cooler even absorbs 10% of incoming sunlight, you're not going to get any cooling, regardless of how good, even if you had the best possible radiative emitter. So what part of our system is having a very, very good solar mirror. So that's just fundamentally enabling this cooling during the hot hours of the day. But the actual cooling power is coming from heating up this object and it radiating away its heat as thermal radiation. So all objects have black body radiation, but what we're doing is actually restructuring that emission over frequency in such a way that it exploits a window in the atmosphere, which allows this radiation to simply go out to outer space.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Willem. Question.
So what have you demonstrated to date?
We're working on building the first lab prototype. We've demonstrated this numerically.
Okay. So you've done no physical work yet on the surface?
No, we have the ARPA-E grant to make this. Yeah.
Okay, so back to John. This is the takeaway part. What would you like to send Aaswath away with? What's his message? What should he wake up and do tomorrow morning?
I guess my advice would be, always start with the customer and work backwards. And I think for this application, I think your costs are probably going to be a little higher because you have vacuum deposition involved versus some of the traditional technologies in cooling. So you need to find a high-value, small application where you can learn and start working your way backwards. If it's robust enough, maybe something like a remote cooling where the solid-state nature, as was described before, could be very helpful.
Feedback, Ryan?
Yeah. From this brief overview, it sounds like you're doing exactly the right thing. The nature of this is we're going to throw a whole bunch of questions at you that, of course, you had no time or resources to deal with or answer. And so worrying about the customer and the economics and, CapEx to scale the production of this thing, nobody these days wants to go invest several $100 million to produce, something where yields are uncertain, et cetera. Those are all risks you can deal with later, but you got to prove that it works, and I think you're doing exactly the right thing. So I would say continue. This is very interesting.
Feedback, Brook.
So there have been a lot of other innovations in HVAC that have really struggled because of the challenges of actual implementation, getting into sales channels, integrating with existing systems, and even companies that did a really good job on the technology failed on this integration piece, and how you connect it to the existing building systems. So I agree with Ryan. I think you have to remove the highest risks first, which is, does the device work? Does it last? Can you manufacture it at scale? But you should also think about how you would go to market with this, and are there any learnings from the way others have struggled in implementation that you can apply here that might change the way you would think about developing the technology?
Feedback, Dan?
First, you're very articulate, very interesting presentation, so I think that's always an important thing in the initial pitch. I do think this cost and time frame for getting to market is important to at least allude to. You talked about getting through this phase and then you'd scale it. But so often what we find in this clean tech area is the challenge of scaling and the cost of scaling and the time frame for scaling. So some ballpark around that is important. And last quick thing, as a non-engineer, when you talk about outer space, I immediately think about outer space. And I assume you don't mean out where the satellites fly.
Takeaway message, Willem.
So I think as you build your prototype, think about what curve are you on, because if you start with theoretical sort of calculations where you're at, probably your prototype will be a little bit underperforming. So where do you go? And the way you pitch, I think you pitch over a range of applications which are some of look high value, others don't. So I think finding the right range. Are you going to go for a panel retrofit, or do you do new build? So I think zooming in on the application quickly and sort of making sure the delta exists, I think, is the key.
Great feedback. Round of applause. Fantastic job.
Thank you, Aaswath. Next up, we have Yaniv Scherson of NGen Corporation. So, Yaniv, come on up.
It's a good music choice. My name is Yaniv Scherson. I'm with NGen Corporation, and I'm going to talk about nitrogen pollution. Nitrogen pollution is one of the biggest threats to the environment today. In effect, it's wastewater treatment facilities and agricultural runoff discharging nitrogen into water bodies, causing algae blooms. They suck out oxygen out of the water and cause fish kills, or otherwise known as dead zones. One of the largest dead zones in the world is in our own backyard at the base of the Mississippi in Louisiana. So we've developed a new process that removes nitrogen waste from wastewater, which is mostly in the form of ammonia, and recovers energy from this waste product. The way we do it is we convert the ammonia into a gas that comes out of the water, and then we burn the gas in already existing biogas engines at wastewater treatment facilities and essentially increase power output. Nitrogen pollution is causing dead zones all over the world. It's a major pressure to get rid of nitrogen for wastewater treatment facilities. It's very costly, and the reason why it's costly is because you see in the conventional process, ammonia has to first get oxidized all the way to nitrate, a two-step process, and then nitrate has to get reduced all the way to nitrogen gas. Oxygen has to be delivered for that first step. That's the #1 operational cost for wastewater treatment facilities. And carbon has to be inputted for the second step. The carbon makes a lot of biomass, essentially bacteria that just grow. That's the second highest operational cost for wastewater treatment facilities. Our process short circuits the conventional nitrogen treatment process by eliminating the nitrate intermediate and stopping at nitrous oxide gas. In effect, we lower the oxygen demand, we lower the carbon and biosolids production, and we recover renewable energy from the waste product itself, something that the conventional process does not do. So, considering that wastewater treatment facilities are often the highest energy expenditures for many cities, Palo Alto is #1, for example, as a wastewater treatment facility, this has a very, very big impact in terms of the energy consumption for a wastewater treatment facility. Next slide, please. So we have two systems running at the bench scale with real wastewater. One is at a wastewater treatment facility that has partnered with us and invested in the technology already. We have another one running in our lab. We're going to take the next year to build a pilot scale system seeded from the bench scale, and then in 2 years go to the commercial scale while making a key hire. Essentially, wastewater treatment facilities, privately run anaerobic digesters, and landfill leachate are all potential customers for this technology. They all discharge nitrogen, and they have to get rid of it. And there's another process, mainly the Anamox process, that's competition, developed out of Europe. They also are a nitrogen short circuit process. They don't recover energy, but they're handicapped by the very slow growth of these organisms. So despite that they've been around for 15 years, there's only about a dozen full-scale systems in Europe today. Our process on a number of metrics is superior. We use fast-growing organisms that are robust and very important. Essentially what we will do is we will make the units, package the hardware, the license and everything, use vendor representatives and consultants to recommend our process to wastewater treatment facilities, anaerobic digesters, and other customers, and make the sale. So this has a potential to introduce a new renewable source of energy that has never been considered from waste material.
And time.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's move right into the questions. Let's start with you, Willem. What question would you like to ask?
So what type of infrastructure are you dependent on for your unit to be a drop-in? Are you got any limitations, and so does there need to be a biogas plant around it?
Well, the units would be installed in existing wastewater treatment facilities, so it would treat the nitrogen that they're producing at half the cost.
But what type of units? Because there's a lot of different wastewater treatment technologies, so is there a limitation to what other infrastructure is required, to where it works and where it doesn't work?
Well, right now it would treat the nitrogen that comes out of an anaerobic digester. So the wastewater treatment facility or the farm or the landfill, well, landfills already have concentrated ammonia, so they would have to have an anaerobic digester right now. I hope that answers your question.
Question, Dan.
You talked about packaging the units. Give me a sense of scale. What would we be looking at, say, a secondary or tertiary treatment plant? And where would it fit?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for a medium-scale wastewater treatment facility like the one in Sunnyvale or Palo Alto, the can-do unit would be something that would fit on the back of a trailer. So tiny footprint for the scale of the plant, but maybe large in terms of what we think.
How many gallon plant is that? I don't know that plant.
So the flow would be 1% of the influent. So typically the influent is anywhere between 20 and 80 million gallons a day. So 1% of that.
Thanks.
So Yaniv, you've been at this a little while. What have you learned about the customer here, and how does that influence your thinking about a business model do you want to sell equipment to wastewater treatment plants? Do they want to run one of these things? Or do you want to go after a service business model? And if so, in each case, who would you partner with? And how do you think about actually growing the business?
That's a great question. That's been kind of at the core of the technology. So wastewater treatment facilities are one potential customer. In the United States, they're mostly publicly owned, which is a detriment to our cause. However, in Europe, they're mostly privately owned, so much faster sales cycle. So privately run wastewater treatment facilities would be a potential customer. We're in partnership with Veolia, the largest wastewater treatment company in the world. They've invested $50,000 in us already, and we're in discussions and piloting the technology with them. So they would be a great market entrance to get us access to privately run facilities. Also, privately run anaerobic digesters are an interesting market. There are over 9,000 in Europe, 3/4 of which are in Germany alone, and they all discharge nitrogen, and they have to get rid of it. So our process would increase the energy they're already producing, plus get rid of the nitrogen, and these are privately run systems. That would be a faster sales cycle.
So equipment or service?
Equipment.
All right.
Yes.
Question, Ryan.
Sure. Can you just give me a little bit of a sketch of a concrete example of, imagine this plays out as you like, you get your idealized customer. What, are you tailoring each individual unit to the capacity of that customer, or do you have a minimum efficient scale for a given unit? What does that look like? What is the throughput? What is the CapEx for that unit? And how do the economics play out?
That's a great question. So a unit would cost something like $1 million. Operating expenditure for a medium-sized wastewater treatment facility is about $15 million, $15 to $20 million, to give a comparison. It would save the customer between $300,000 and $500,000 a year, again, in the oxygen savings and carbon and biosolids disposal. So something like a 2 to 3 ROI for the customer. These systems of wastewater treatment facilities, equipment runs for 30+ years. So this is something it's simple. It would run for a comparable lifetime, saving about $300,000 to $500,000 a year.
Great. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, my question was really more practical in nature. Any thoughts on serviceability, and any consumables?
Yes, there would likely be some type of service. Consumables, there are none. We use the waste, like the conventional processes, they use the waste constituents as the inputs for the process. So the inputs are air from the atmosphere, and then carbon that's already in the water, and nitrogen that's already in the water.
He doesn't like that answer.
You didn't like that answer? No? Okay. Sorry about that.
Am I so transparent?
Best I can do in about 10 seconds.
So moving right back down to Willem. Willem, let's send Yaniv on his way. What should we recommend to him?
Well, I think you really have to look at whether or not how realistic it is that a large wastewater facility, because you're sort of looking for an upgrade, whether that market truly exists, or whether you can scale it down enough to say I can move enough units to sort of the biogas market, which I think is bigger in Europe right now than it is in the US. So again, I think it's good that you get that international perspective real early on, but then see, you know, how small can you build a unit to really attach it to somewhere, and what are your dependencies? Because you list there's 500 plants, but are they really all compatible with sort of your system? And explore that, how big that really is.
Thank you.
Feedback
So you're, at least in the US, you're entering a world, as you said, of publicly owned treatment works, not publicly owned facilities. That immediately takes you into the world of the Environmental Protection Agency, Clean Water Act regulations, and I would urge you, if you haven't done it, take a look at what's going to help and hurt from that regulatory perspective. Could be a big boon, could be a big bust for you. Secondly, if you're really producing something that you call renewable energy, or as a component of renewable energy, in some states, it'd be interesting to see whether you would get some help from the renewable portfolio standard in that state. And third, again, whether you might qualify for tax credits as a renewable energy source. I'm not quite clear on sort of how you'd make that case, but be worth looking at.
So if I were you, I would work back from the answer, and I think Dan said it right. In the U.S., you have to depend on kind of a regulatory environment. I wouldn't do business here; it's too hard. I would go right to Europe, and you've got the right partner with Veolia. So I would just focus a lot on working back from the answer. What does the customer need to see? What proof points do you need? What do the economics need to look like? Do you fit into their infrastructure? Make sure that those are crystal clear. What do you need to get the customer to say yes? And make sure you're designing your pilot plant to address all of those issues. Because when you design your pilot plant, drawing the box is really hard. You can do a lot, you can do a little. You want to just make sure that you're drawing it in such a way that you get the right answers to enable your customer to at least address the questions. You probably won't have all the answers, but that'd be my advice.
That question we discussed earlier about the clear, what do the economics look like? I think making that case really upfront and clearly in a very crisp example is important. And then I would really focus on highlighting what are the key assumptions and the key risks that you need to prove out to validate, and at what scale is that relevant. So there's myriad things that are going to come up and that you can spend, some of this you can do on a benchtop, some of it is a much bigger scale to sort of prove out some of those assumptions. And I would lay out that kind of risk reduction plan. I think that's the critical thing to look at this stage.
Three brief points. The first one is I'd make sure that as you get into the conversations, you understand the process robustness. I mean, you never know in many cases what's actually going to come down the pipe in some of these plants. It's been mentioned before, but our experience in water, buying behaviors are difficult. These are large, slow to decide entities that have a variety of operational constraints that are not conducive to scaling fast. And last thought, I might take a strong look at maybe New Zealand. They certainly have a need for something like this.
A lot of nitrogen.
Great feedback. So round of applause. Great job, Yaniv. Well done.
Thank you, Yaniv. Next up, we have Drew DeWalt of Valhalla Energy. Drew, you have 3 minutes.
So my partners and I at Valhalla Energy are committed to providing clean, reliable energy at a price competitive with existing fossil fuel generation. Our first opportunity is in Chile, where we have looked at the market there, and the mining sector there is expanding aggressively, and mining consumers are consuming electricity at a rapidly increasing rate. At the same time, electricity prices are going through the roof as recent attempts to build new fossil fuel generation have been blocked or delayed. Additionally, the incredible solar resource that exists in Chile's Atacama Desert has not been exploited because there's been very few solar developments, with the intermittent electricity being unattractive to industrial consumers. So we at Valhalla Energy have devised a solution that will allow for large-scale adoption of renewable resource technologies by combining them with a unique ocean pump storage unit. We will achieve significant cost savings by taking advantage of the distinct geography of Chile's northern desert. So traditional pump storage facilities require 2 dams. We don't require any dams. Traditional facilities require 5 to 10 miles of tunneling. We require up to 80% less tunneling. Traditional facilities cost around $3,000 per kilowatt installed. We plan to build our facility for less than $1,000 per kilowatt installed. We're going to combine this facility with a 500 megawatt solar array, and we're going to use that combined facility to provide this relatively consistent energy to a mining off-taker. So next slide. The ocean pump storage facility is going to cost $300 million to build, which will allow us to deliver 1,200 gigawatt hours of clean, reliable electricity under a long-term power purchase agreement at a roughly $40 million profit annually. So pump storage traditional technology is relatively well developed, but our application is new. Nobody out there is providing an option like ours with this integrated solution. So we've already raised $3 million in capital, and we've done the preliminary development work. We are currently developing 2 sites, one of which is in this picture, and we have 6 sites secured right now in anticipation of future expansion. The project is currently on a short list for a mining tender in Chile, and our discussions with them have been energizing, seeing how excited they are to potentially secure this clean, cost-effective, reliable energy resource. My background is I was a nuclear engineer in the US Navy, and I've realized that this opportunity here provides the potential of revolutionizing the entire electricity industry in Chile. Along with my 2 Chilean co-founders, we're looking for $10 million in development capital to finish the engineering, to get all the necessary permits we need, and to deliver the final firm bid to the mining company.
In time.
And so I would welcome any of your questions. Excited to talk more about the incredible opportunity that Valhalla represents.
Go ahead, John. Clarification question.
Sure. Hey, could you describe a little bit about, do you have any strong technology differentiation, or is really the key to the business here that you're going to be an advantaged developer for this particular market?
More the latter than the former, but the idea is born out of really taking advantage of the unique geography in Chile to be able to minimize the capex of the pump storage piece, store solar energy or other renewable energy inputs at scale, and be able to combine the two so that our output looks like a coal-fired power plant to an off-taker.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Sure.
Question?
This is interesting. It sounds pretty straightforward. Where are you at in the rights and permitting process? Can you talk about that and what that looks like?
For land or for anything?
For the land to build out this whole project?
Yeah, so we have land secured on the pump storage side. We have our own solar site that we've been taking measurements. We plan to basically outsource the solar piece to a large solar EPC provider, and we'll partner with them to build this thing. So I guess from the permitting side, you need maritime permitting, you need environmental permitting, which are two different pieces. You need right-of-way land for the transmission. And we've already done the initial studies, and we've submitted initial bids to the proper government agencies.
Okay.
How long does that take? I mean, I think it's a great project. You've got solar connected to the cheapest form of storage.
Right.
But permitting is the monster risk in any pumped hydro project. So I'd be curious what the realistic timeline is to remove that risk. And B, this is probably not something that the venture world would look at, right? It's traditional project finance. It's certainly beyond my spending limit. I don't know about Ryan here. He might be able to pull this off. But curious how you think about the cost of capital for this project and where you'd go after, this source of funding, because venture would be probably too costly for something like this.
No, we definitely agree that it's not at the very least a traditional venture funded project. So it is a project finance piece. I guess to your timeline piece, we looked, some of the permitting, like the environmental impact assessment, could take up to a year. We've engaged, we're already working on studies with environmental consultants there who have done these several times and gotten the permits, and that process moves us forward to where we would start actually putting shovels in the ground around 2015 and then come into commercial operation at the very end of 2017. From the second question was regarding capital. So we are looking at development capital right now that will get us up to basically full project completion on paper. And then we're working in partnerships right now. The key partnerships are clearly a solar provider and then also somebody to operate the hydraulic plant once we've built it. We think both of those sources are potential sources for equity capital, and then also some larger private equity infrastructure focused funds has some interest as well.
Go ahead, Dan.
So you've got a mine. Does it operate 24 hours a day?
24/7, 365 with very high electricity.
What are the economics of this? How does it compare to straight PV with backup?
What do you mean? What do you use for your backup, though?
You tell me.
Yeah. So
I mean, Chile there are a variety of resources there that could provide backup.
Right.
But how do the economics compare?
So the economics are better than doing something with a different backup, like combining with a gas-fired generation unit there or something else.
You've run those numbers and you know that. Is a significant difference?
There is. We've looked at a lot of different ways to open up the renewable energy market here, and we see this as clearly the most cost-effective. What you have to understand in Chile is they have no domestic resources except for the hydro in the south, which is hard to get to the north, and we can get into that. And in addition, they import all this coal and natural gas, and because they don't have great relationships with their neighbors, they can't get cheap natural gas from Peru. They actually import from South Africa. And so, like, they would love to tap into the cheap shale gas revolution in the United States, but
so when we start exporting to Chile, the economics of this will not be as good.
We are comparing ourselves to natural gas generation, which they're trying to bring online, and we are still cost competitive.
What I meant, though, and I won't go on,
Okay.
but less expensive natural gas as backup to a straight 500 megawatt PV array could end up being cheaper than what you're doing with pump storage.
Okay, yeah, you're exactly right, and that's a possibility. They would have to be operated in tandem. Part of this process is we actually connect through existing grid infrastructure, so it's more of a virtual plant. So if you're co-locating and operating together, potentially, my partners run the numbers on that, and again, we don't feel like it's competitive because you'd have to operate both. And if you're a large-scale producer, you don't want to optimize for a solar array.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Willem.
So what's unique about the reservoir that you use for the pump storage? That you say, well, you don't need the pipe, but is the reservoir there? Are you using an existing pond?
So we're taking advantage of the very unique geography of Chile, where these mountains come straight out of the ocean, and instead of peaking like here in California, they plateau off. So we just fill up a natural basin and tap from the bottom there, drill into the ocean, and connect and use the ocean as a lower reservoir. So no dams. There's a little extra CapEx on having salt-resistant equipment that you're going to use, but it really lowers the CapEx significantly because that, in addition, that elevation change takes place over a relatively small distance. For anybody who cares about hydro, it's about a 600-meter head that we're producing.
Let's move right into feedback. And Ryan, you can start. If you'd like to give him you can turn your second question into a piece of takeaway advice.
Sure. You know, like, I think it's really interesting. There's a couple more things that would be good to learn about. So I guess, you know, I'm not aware of anybody who's used seawater for pumped hydro storage. So I don't know if there's a salinity issue with building out these projects or not. And you mentioned getting somebody else to build out the solar part of the project, but I don't remember if you mentioned somebody building out the pumped hydro piece of it, which, I mean, I would contract this thing and then get people who've done this before and just get it done and not try to bear any of the project development risk.
No, that's the plan.
Yeah, that's what I assume.
Thank you.
Great.
And feedback, John?
I guess my feedback is, you know, really take a strong look at, you know, are you really advantaged as a developer? Do you have a competitive advantage against others may want to come in and eat your lunch here? Yeah, I mean, first mover is great, but
can't answer these. Sorry.
You know, I mean, honestly, it's a pretty competitive space, and there's not a lot of barriers to entry.
It is.
So.
The unique
there's no
thing is
response to the feedback. Sorry.
We'll talk about
Stop. This is the. Just take it away. So, other feedback, maybe Brook?
You know, at first glance, it looks like a great project, right? That's a really cheap form of storage and a giant project, and mining costs are high. I'm a little surprised the IRR is only 12%. I mean, it doesn't seem that compelling. It might not clear a lot of hurdle rates for something that has a lot of political risk. It's large scale. You know, you could probably remove some of those by virtue of your partnerships, but you know, I'd take a hard look at that and see if, you know, are there other things that you could do with the solar technology that you're using? Are you know, have you really exhausted the best economics there? Yeah, I don't know. I'd just do a little bit more work on trying to make that a little more attractive. I'm not sure that clears big project hurdle rates for, you know, you need $1 billion, right? So.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Dan.
You used the term unique geography, and I wasn't clear whether this was literally a single project that could be built in Chile or whether we were looking at 5 or 10 or 20 of them, because it will be a much more interesting opportunity if there was some replicability here. You know, you're going to have to figure your way through whatever regulatory structure there is, you know, convince people from the financing perspective. So next time you present this, I would make it clear whether this is a one-off or there's multiple ones you could do.
And go ahead, Willem.
So I think it's a good idea to start with a project like this, at least if you do renewable energy in a place where at least you know energy is high, because you know it's difficult to compete. But you're going to have, especially with solar, you're going to have a lot of intermittency, and you didn't forget you need to store all the energy overnight. So you oversize your solar quite a bit, and hopefully, you know, that works out. So I think there you might indeed look at, you know, why did all the projects get delayed? Because you're quite aggressive in your timeline and really understand that market is that, well, if it's at a permitting risk, then, you know, you might carry sort of the similar risk going forward as well.
Excellent feedback. Great job, Drew. Round of applause.
Thank you, Drew. So next up we have Grant Lawrence of Parrilla Energy. Go ahead, Grant.
I've been in green energy for about 10 years now, and about a year ago, I realized that there was a underutilized 1970s technology that's well, pretty inefficient in its power production and its massive scale. It's called a solar updraft tower. Old design. Well, I've come up with a patent pending design. There's 6 patent pendings right now, and the first is the most important, where it reduces the tower size by 85%. And the amount of land needed by 90%. And I'm able to deliver 60 megawatts of power at a rate of 4 to 6 cents per kilowatt. And I call it a solar thermal tower. The tower doesn't go up, it lays on the ground, which makes it much easier to build. There are companies currently trying to use this old technology. Just recently, China has completed a 2,000 foot tall tower. It produces 20 megawatts of power, and it costs roughly $750 million to build. Hyperion Energy in Australia is going to build a 3,280 foot tall tower, and that's going to have a greenhouse covering 8 square miles of land, and that's going to power a mining operation. I'm going in just the opposite direction. My towers are roughly 400 feet tall, and well, it's 400 feet tall, and the footprint is 512 acres that I need to produce power. I expect with the money that I'm going to raise that I will need to finish out the engineering. The engineering is about 95% complete. There's a few things that are still working on with the airflow, and the ROI looks like about 5 years. I'm anticipating that within 3 years, we're going to have a solar thermal tunnel complete and selling electricity on the open market, and at that point, we will sustain ourselves through long-term power purchase agreements with small and medium-sized utilities. And now, I'm looking at large-scale renewable energy. Here's our tower here, a mock-up of it. My small scales that I have at my house just don't photograph well. I have a vision of a future where I don't want to put solar panels on my house. That just doesn't seem productive enough. I want large-scale renewable energy, and I have a vision that we can have large-scale renewable energy and also enjoy the fruits of our labor, so we can be responsible to the environment and have renewable energy. And that's about it. Any questions?
Okay, so we'll moderate the questions here. So, any order. Willem, you look like you have a question. Go for it.
So, how large is the diameter of the generator that you need to have in the tower?
Well, it uses wind turbines inside. It uses wind turbines inside the tunnel. So I have a tunnel with wind turbines in there, and I figured out the aerodynamics. So as the wind gets sucked in, it corrects for abnormalities like stalling on turbines, things like that. The tower is 400 feet high and about 1,200 feet in diameter. I'm sorry, it's 400 feet high, 400 feet in diameter. But according to the picture here, the overall size is 1,200 feet.
Okay. And so you mentioned you built some prototypes on the top of your roof?
No, I've got 2 in my backyard.
Okay.
They're small ones, though.
And so what type of engineering have you done to see whether some of those things that work actually scale to the sizes you think they do?
I have hours and hours of CFD modeling. I've checked all the airflow. The small scale models work pretty well, but when you get to so small, the airflow is really hard to measure on a small scale. So I've gone to computational fluid dynamics to verify a lot of the formulas.
Question, Dan?
400 feet tall, 400 feet in diameter, and 512 acres.
Yes.
Help me with that, will you?
Okay. Yeah.
Why am I looking at 512 acres?
Okay. Well.
And how many megawatts? I didn't.
60 megawatts. So you have a tower that's 400 feet high, 400 feet in diameter. Around it, if you can see the diagram here, there is a tunnel. Instead of building straight up, which got it? And also, I have a radiator on the inside. As opposed to using a large greenhouse, I have a radiator and a solar thermal collector on the ground around it. And that's where it takes up 500 acres.
Thank you.
Question, Brook?
So how does this compare to traditional solar thermal in terms of utility, efficiency, total cost? Seems a little expensive.
No, it's not expensive at all. It's about $125 million to build the plant. There's a 5-year ROI. It should produce about $24 million worth of electricity per year. 60 megawatts, 12 hours a day. North Texas, southern Arizona, southern Nevada, they get about 355 days of sun a year, and all I need is a sunny day.
Okay, how about a levelized cost of electricity or some metric that we
I
could
can
compare
sell
to?
electricity at 4 to 6, or I can produce it at 4 to 6 cents per kilowatt. Sell it to local.
Sorry, is it per kilowatt hour?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I thought you were saying $4 to $6 a kilowatt.
Oh no, 4 to 6 cents per kilowatt.
Per kilowatt hour.
Kilowatt hour, yes. Sorry. Sell it to the local utilities at 8 cents, where they'll retail it at 13 to 14 cents here on the West Coast.
Okay.
Question, Ryan.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm very skeptical on the economics. You mentioned a Chinese project that was built, 20 megawatt project built for $750 million.
Yep. And
that sounds like $30 million a megawatt, which is high.
Correct, yeah. That was funded by the Chinese government.
Yeah.
And they're building straight up and down, which, as an engineer, I can't tell you how to build a 3,000-foot tower. It's just, a lot of that cost involved is the building process. Mine lays on the ground. We can build it with prefab concrete. Really simple to build.
Go ahead, John.
I was going to ask one material question. How are you actually collecting the solar energy, and then is this like oil-filled trough or heliostats or?
Yeah, I plan on having just if anyone has a swimming pool here, the solar thermal collectors that are the black sheets on top of your house. That's the most simple form, lay them out in the desert. I have a little more advanced than that, but that's the basic concept. Run a lot of water through that, gets very hot, runs up to a radiator, which produces a low pressure zone beneath the radiator. Hot air rises, and it sucks air in the backside.
Okay. And one last question. Do you have any intention to integrate some form of thermal storage to maintain intermittency or operation at night?
I understand that renewable energy is not a replacement for conventional power. I don't think it ever will be. I mean, there's ways to store it, but I don't think, not efficiently, at least in my eyes. So this will fire up on warm days, and it'll throttle back a gas-fired power plant.
So actional feedback, Willem. What should we send Graham away with?
I think typically, sort of solutions that sound really simple tend to sometimes be overlooked, and so especially this one is sort of infrastructure heavy. But I think, once you start scaling things that work in theory, are they really scalable and or does cost escalate and then you sort of lose your benefits? So I think in the pitch, if you can sort of articulate what you think, why you can build it and how it's really going to work, I think that helps your case. Because like you said, people are looking more and more at these solar towers, although they've been around forever, like you mentioned. Back in the 70s, people have built these things. So I think it's interesting to see it come back, but I think you have to look at why did it fail, didn't get more traction, and sort of address that, whether indeed, you're cost effective compared to, other renewable energy.
Takeaway advice, Dan? Sure.
Just a few quick process points. I think it could have been a clearer pitch. Number one, I didn't think you were helped by criticizing rooftop PV. Not worth setting up that competition. And I don't think you were helped by talking about renewable energy will never be a replacement for traditional energy. I think you ought to go out and sell your own product, but I don't think those comparisons are all that helpful. And lastly, I wouldn't minimize what it takes to put a 400-foot tower up from a regulatory standpoint.
Feedback, Brook.
Look, when you're looking at something that's been done before, there's reasons why it failed. Willem said that well. I think I would go talk to those people and make sure you understand the critiques that people might be giving you and that feedback, and make sure you address them, and that I'd spend a lot of time there.
Ryan?
Yeah. There's a high bar of skepticism whenever you're pulling out and dusting off a 40-year-old technology, for sure. I think that's clear, that's been said. But the beautiful thing about it is this is conventional and well-understood technology, and CFD is understood. So you can, in a very cost-effective way, gain yourself a ton of credibility by going to some other folks that are well-known in the space and get some validation. I mean, I assume you have patents and IP on all this stuff, which is obviously step one. But you can go to NREL, which is a national lab and has a wind technology center, and there are brilliant people there that can validate a lot of your modeling. And so if you get some third-party validation from a credible source just on the numbers that you've done, I think that'll really carry the ball forward effectively for you.
And feedback, John.
I would just, I'd say I think you're calibrated pretty well on where you might need to be as far as costs go. 4 to 6 cents sounds like a pretty good target. I mean, large-scale solar right now, 7-ish, right? Wind, 5.5 or 6, something like that. So I think the question is, how do you validate that? And what you have here is a major project undertaking. I mean, I guess my question is just, or my advice would be, go find your first project. Just say, theoretically, I'm going to go buy this land. What's it really going to cost? I'm going to go get an interconnect agreement to put some wires in here. What's it really going to cost? I'm actually going to talk to a project company to build a structure like this. What's a ballpark figure from something that's a proxy for what you're going to do? I think you might find your costs may be a little higher than what you're thinking, but you never know. I mean, but you got to explore that. Cost is your #1 risk.
Great job, Grant. Round of applause.
Thank you so much for that. So we're going to take a brief break in a moment, but before we do, we are going to hear from our platinum sponsor, GameChanger, and we're going to hear from Willem to talk about the GameChanger program.
So just, my mic on? Just a little bit about Shell GameChanger. So Shell GameChanger is the early stage type seed angel investor for Shell. What we try to do is identify radical innovation ideas that are all over the energy space that help both traditional oil and gas, and now also, through events like this, we reach out to future energy solutions to make those part of our portfolio as well. So what we really have to offer is a collaborative partnership model to early stage ideas and people that can execute on those ideas.
That have a good idea that can have a major impact in the business. So we look at simple criteria, you have value, novelty. There needs to be a doable plan. So we help you create a proof of concept, and then hopefully by the proof of concept is demonstrated, and we can generate enough interest either by the Shell Technology Ventures or traditional Shell businesses or R&D to bring the idea further. So we have a flexible partnership model in IP arrangements that we work with startup companies. We can work with startup companies, universities, people are just about to start a company that haven't demonstrated a whole lot. So we're very flexible as long as the idea is great and we got great people behind it. If you have a good idea, just go to our website. It's www.shell.com/gamechanger, or talk to any of us. There's my coworker, Liz Fleming. She's in the audience as well. Or myself, just come up to me in the break and share your idea and see what we think.
Wonderful, thanks, Willem. So Liz, I know we'll be at Ray's Grill afterwards, so if you all join us over there, you can talk to her and share your ideas. So we're going to take a 5-minute break, so just get up and stretch your legs, don't leave the room. We'll be back very shortly with the remaining 4 pitches and the contest. Can ask the panel to take their seats as well.
Common sense, it's good.
Yeah, this is actually how he came up with it. He was sitting in the room.
Okay, so first up, after the break, is Panos Adamopoulos of Seismos.
Interesting.
Hello, my name is Panos Adamopoulos. I'm the CEO of Seismos. Seismos is a technology-enabled services company that utilizes the power of energy waves, hardware, software, to provide an MRI of underground fluids that are essential for the oil and gas industry. Seismos is disrupting a $14 billion seismic services industry by introducing a diagnostics platform that focuses on what was previously considered noise waves and not seismic reflections like all the other companies are using. Those noise waves are induced low-frequency waves that stay trapped in underground liquid formations and are the best energy form to differentiate between oil, water, and gas in thousands of yards underground. We have developed, with the help of the Lawrence Berkeley Lab, a patented technology that allows to analyze those waves and extract information that nobody else has been able to provide. Competitive technologies are not able to distinguish between the different fluids, are not real-time, and require production to shut down. Seismos provides eyes to the operators. It's real-time and does not require production to shut down. With the information that we provide to the operators, we allow them to make smart oil field decisions that can increase the output from 70% all the way to 300%. Next slide, please. Our technology can be applied in various EOR markets, including secondary floods, tertiary floods, fracking as well. It could also be applied in CO2 sequestration and contamination detection. We have chosen as our beachhead market the CO2 EOR market, a 9 billion market, which every year loses 5 billion because they're unable to track CO2 flows once CO2 has been injected underground. We're not a student class project. We're a real business assembled by engineers and business people from both Berkeley and Texas. We're in talks with the VC community. We won the Venture Labs investment competition in Austin, and we won the Shell Technology Ventures Award last week in Houston. We're asking for 1.5 million, and we believe we have a value proposition. Thank you.
Time. Okay, so let's move straight into the questions. Go ahead, Willem. What question would you like to ask?
Also, obviously, Shell already likes it. You can see how big of a company Shell is to run you again. So you focus very much on CO2 here, but so how far does the technology carry out to other applications or other EOR?
So this technology is able to distinguish between different fluids, that including usually water, CO2 because when it's injected underground, it's in a liquid format, and water. So it can be applied in various technologies, and actually in our talks with Shell, Shell is mostly interested in steam injection.
Right. So what have you demonstrated so far of how the technology works?
So we have these graphs that you see are from real applications in the Stratton field in Texas. So it has already been applied in primary recovery. So what we're doing now is we're taking this technology and we're applying it in CO2 EOR.
Quick question. You talked about an improvement from 70% to 300%, and I didn't understand of what?
Of the output, I apologize. So what happens in the industry now, for example, in the CO2 EOR industry, is they inject CO2, which pushes the oil banks, increases production. So they inject it here, and normally they expect it to go that way, so that does push the oil bank. But what happens in reality, it goes all the other way. And they have absolutely no idea where it goes. So by knowing where the flows are, they can adjust the injection patterns, they can drill new injection wells, they can drill new production wells.
Thank you.
So just a point of clarification, is this just sensing technology, or is this actual seismic, is the seismic phenomenon enhancing the oil recovery? Because I've heard of that as well.
I'm not very sure that I answered exactly what you asked, but...
So you can use seismic to disrupt the oil-water interface, and that will improve recovery. It's actually a mechanism to improve recovery. Or is this just sensing to know where fluids are?
No, this is a sensing mechanism.
It's just sensing?
So it's providing information as to where the flows go. Because now, surface seismic, or VSP, these Schlumberger and Halliburton technologies, are enabled to provide the answer.
Okay, so what's the next best alternative for the CO2 EOR folks to understand what fluids are down there?
So what the industry is now using is sometimes, when it really goes bad, they shut down production, and they apply what is called a cross-well technology. This is also used by Schlumberger. So this one is pretty good, actually, but shutting down production is a red flag in this industry because, on average, for an average project, shutting down production for half a month costs more than 44 million. So they don't do that.
Question, Ryan.
Yeah, the conventional seismic technology, on what fraction of CO2 EOR projects is it deployed? Is it on all of them right now?
So Surface seismic is applied in all fields even before CO2 is injected, because it gives some information on the lithography. They don't use it in CO2 injections because it's absolutely inaccurate. What they do use is what we mentioned before, is the crosswell, and they only do that when production really goes bad. So they do take that big cost of 44 million, and then they apply a seismic survey.
So for your target application, the CO2 EOR, there's really not a deployed solution that you're competing with.
Well, there's no real-time solution that does not require production to shut down. There's always competition. Yeah. Not spending on this is also competition, but nothing that really works.
Yep. Great.
Go ahead, John.
So I've been familiar with, say, fiber acoustic solutions that can be deployed down well during production. I guess my question is, could you describe a little bit about what's the deployment? I mean, do you have trucks parked around with microphones? And how would you compete against sort of this emerging fiber optic?
That's an excellent question, and it shows the big difference that we have from competition. So competition usually uses small earthquakes. They use thunder trucks, which induce a big earthquake underground, which is disruptive for production also and for the environment as well. So what we do is we set up a grid of striking devices and receivers on top of existing equipment, which does not disrupt production. And in a way, what we do is like that laser grid at Mission Impossible, if you've seen. So, but instead of lasers going and coming, we have seismic waves going and coming. So we build an underground grid of seismic waves. So once the flow crosses that grid, we know immediately where it is.
How long does it take to set up on a site?
Oh, it's just a matter of a week.
It takes a week to set up?
Yes.
Okay.
Actionable feedback, Willem.
Well, I think the key is to get enough data to convince customers that you really have something and influence it. So having the right partners and get the right transparency and do it the way they want to see it and not the way you think they want to see it. Because I think to convince people, oil and gas is a very sort of conservative industry, so they want to see the things exactly in their way. So find the right partners, and probably the service companies are sort of a better target for reaching a bigger audience than maybe individual operators, because they won't have that many assets where this could be applied.
Good name and logo, like that. Interesting business model. I like the broad array of potential customers. I think, being able to calibrate to them. I would say, though, it needs to be clear how you differentiate this from the existing approaches. Okay. That's really the key to selling this.
So I think about the business model that you're going to execute on. Are you going to sell the equipment that actually provides the testing and the sensing to a Schlumberger, or do you think you're going to be able to disrupt them by providing a dynamic view underground to Shell or others?
So we sell. I mean, I'm supposed not.
There's no response to the feedback.
Well, if you want to think big, you could think about changing the way that reservoir management is done today, right? And just be something to consider. What business model makes the most sense for you?
Go ahead, Ryan.
I don't have anything really to add. I think this is interesting.
And John?
Interesting. Big area of interest for GE as well. I guess my only suggestion would be make sure you understand very clearly exactly how you're going to fit into the operating model that whoever your service partner is. So if you're going to be in the CO2 EOR space, somebody's providing that service, you're going to have to meet their operational metrics, right? And I don't know if a week of setup is going to work for them, right? I think you got to sort of work through that and really figure out where you fit in and what you have to do to be successful.
Thank you.
Feedback. Round of applause. Well done, Panos.
Thank you, Panos. So next up we have Luke Iseman of Reicher.
Hello, my name is Luke Iseman. I'm CTO and co-founder of a company called Reicher. And unlike many other energy technologies, we are not a large infrastructure required kind of company. We are a reusing waste kind of company. Specifically, we reuse oil drums, some of which held Shell oil at one point. And the crop waste from farmers in some of the poorest countries in the world, as well as in California's yards. So what we do is we take crop waste that farmers would otherwise burn in open field fires, and we sell them a device for about $50 US that lets them create something called biochar. Biochar sequesters some of the carbon that the plants have used to grow, and it adds to the soil's richness. We're not sure exactly why it works, but it works. We're seeing 44% increases in yield compared to the use of chemical fertilizer. So this is a real benefit for farmers. This is the difference for a lot of our farmers between, barely subsisting and being able to send their kids to school and otherwise progress in life. We're exploring now, it's early, but we're exploring what to do with all the excess heat and syngas that we're producing in this process. Right now we have customers who are buying our product simply for the value of the biochar. So that's a huge area of growth and exploration for us in the future. This is different because it's the lowest cost way for farmers to improve their soil while also sequestering carbon. This is not carbon neutral, this is a carbon negative technology. Estimates place it at about 12% of all human CO2 emissions around the world. We could offset 12% of that through wide adoption of this technology. Next slide, please. So from a financial perspective, we realized we needed to produce a precision metal cut device in essentially the middle of nowhere in Western Kenya. So we invented a factory based around a 20-foot shipping container. It lets us essentially distribute hardware like software. I'm able to do research and development in Oakland with my shipping container factory there, and my team in Kenya is able to deploy things the next day. So we currently sell and lease our systems to farmers. We have over 1,200 paying customers in Kenya. The advantage we provide to them is that we're at or better than price performance parity with fertilizer. A typical farmer in Kenya spends more for one season of fertilizer than the cost of our whole kiln. We are partnered with and continuing to grow our partnerships with third-party distributors. And for our customers, this is, again, really the difference between barely scraping by and growing their individual smallholder farms. So what we're looking to do is really bridge the valley of death. We have these paying customers. We've been grant funded to date. This will be our first equity round, and really we're looking to do between $500,000 and $1.5 million. What that will let us do is both diversify geographically as well as really kind of hit the 10,000 unit mark that MFIs want us to hit to be able to really start getting someone else to carry the risk of financing the kiln operation.
In time. Okay, so John, what question do you have for Luke?
We've seen a number of char companies over the years. I guess my question is, how much do we understand about what makes good char versus bad char? And does that matter in the market that you're going after?
So the dirty secret of soil science that I'll share with you all is we really don't know very much about how we grow the food that we need to survive. Our best guess is that biochar's main role is affecting the cation exchange capacity, which is another thing that's poorly understood of the soil. There does not appear to be much difference between poor char and high quality char. That appears to largely have been a marketing gimmick by companies trying to build large infrastructure rather than cheap kilns.
Question, Ryan?
Yeah, could you just educate us a little bit on your carbon accounting? So you're calling this carbon negative, but tell me how that works.
Sure. So compost is carbon neutral over the course of about 50 years. The norm in many farms, most farms in the developing world, and all of them in the poorest countries in the world, they burn all of their crop waste, their sugarcane trash or their maize waste, in open field fires, which is one of the largest point source emissions of carbon dioxide around the world. So by creating biochar, it's essentially charcoal that you bury. So you're burying 98% pure carbon. Our latest estimates, this was discovered because people found it in the rainforest where food crops wouldn't otherwise grow on the outskirts of villages. There's these large deposits carbon dated to thousands of years ago. So long answer short, it sequesters carbon that the plants have already sequestered, just locks it into the soil rather than allowing it to be re-emitted into the atmosphere.
Go ahead, Brook.
So biochar is it's a great idea. It's exciting from a carbon sink perspective. But the challenge that we've seen is no one's really been able to validate the value of the product. And you say that you're going to do, try and price this at parity with chemical fertilizers, but this doesn't have nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium in it, right? So what have you done to try to validate that this can actually displace fertilizer?
Yes, that's a really good point. We operate, our shipping container in the picture is actually on our 6-acre test farm in Western Kenya. And we've done a variety of tests. Our latest are that the government recommended levels of DAP, the main fertilizer in much of the developing world. So we apply that to one field, and then we apply a farmer-created mix of horse and cow urine with biochar. So the urine provides the nitrogen content. That is outperforming the government fertilizer levels by 44% in terms of yield in our latest trials. So
you can have horses in your shipping container?
we have a secret weapon hidden behind it.
What is the market clearing price for horse urine in Kenya?
It's negative. That's actually, yeah, we've done some work with the Gates Foundation around actually having char producing toilets where we maintain the nitrogen content of the urine and feces, which, you know, unsurprisingly, we take food in, and then what we excrement is essentially exactly what plants want to grow. We just need to sanitize it. It's a little harder to sell.
Question, Dan.
I try not to get pissed off, so.
Easy.
I've spent many years in the penitentiary, so I apologize for that. Okay, you had some emphasis on syngas, at least in the presentation, but it wasn't clear at all to me how you take a 50-gallon drum and produce syngas that's going to go anywhere useful. Does this require a big scale-up?
It would not. Most people have taken that approach. There's some really interesting giant plants that Siemens and others do, like 400 megawatt things. Our vision is to use the charcoal. So some charcoal will go into the soil. Some will then be burnt, as people did, you know, years ago in Germany during the war to run cars. So by making the charcoal first, we're getting rid of the main problem that people have with using syngas, which is all the impurities, the tars and other things in the wood. So that's still early. We have a generator running in our Oakland shop off of it occasionally. It's still sporadic, but that's exciting.
So there is, just to be clear, there is a moment, I mean, you anticipate a situation where these 50-gallon drums will somehow be producing syngas that will end up in a vehicle? Or again, does it have to be, is there a lot more engineering work to be done on that?
So to clarify, we would take the charcoal that we produce and then burn that as, it's basically, that produces very clean syngas rather than the dirty syngas that you get by using straight ag waste.
Got it.
Question, Willem.
So you mentioned your control experiment with the nitrogen source and the char mixed. So what does the nitrogen source without the char do for you?
So biochar is 98% pure carbon. It doesn't have any nutrient value for the plants. The best analogy I've heard is that it's like a sponge.
I know that, but isn't for a farmer, wouldn't it be easier to displace some of chemical fertilizer with sort of more natural made fertilizer, and you have the same effect? So where do you sort of add the value of the char? Because sort of the carbon sequestration is more of an argument if you care, whereas, you know, I assume in Kenya it's less of an issue if you're a subsistence farmer.
Right. So the sponge roll works with organic or inorganic fertilizers. Some of our more conservative farmers will still use inorganic fertilizers. They'll just cut their usage to half and still get the same results because the sponge effect helps prevent a lot of the runoff that you'd otherwise get. It absorbs a lot of the nitrogen.
Is there a decrease in benefit over the years? Let's say you do this for 5 or 10 years, or what's the expectation that the effect is going to be the same? Because at a certain time, but you've supplemented the organic carbon in the soil to a point that that's enough to sort of create these benefits effect because you almost like restored the soil. So is there an incremental benefit? Is that the expectation?
There's an incremental and an ongoing benefit. You are absolutely correct that you want to get up around 3% or a little higher carbon content in the soil. When we do the math, our farmers are going to be, for generations, still adding 50-gallon drums worth of char. But that's part of why we're starting to think about what else we can do with this sequestered carbon. If we can displace gasoline and other more polluting sources of power with our syngas technology.
Okay, so coming back down to here, John, takeaway feedback, advice.
Like, I think what you're doing is great. I mean, I love the small-scale approach, emerging markets. I mean, it's a noble initiative, right? I guess my real question is, you know, can you move all of Western agriculture by 10% of crop yield? You know, how do you set the big goal, right? And then how do you think about how to monetize that? It's a tough challenge, but my feedback is if that's the ultimate big game, then I'd start thinking about how you start selling that part, because that, I think, where a lot of the real money might be unlocked.
Feedback, Ryan?
Yeah, I guess I'd echo that. It depends on what's your driver here. I mean, if you want to have a grassroots sort of focused effort, or you want to impact carbon usage, or you want to make a lot of money, those are, you know, maybe you can do 2 out of 3, maybe you can do 3 out of 3, but it's going to kind of drive you in different directions. I would, this whole thing about time release of nitrogen, basically you're talking about using this as a sponge. That's a very big deal for agriculture here in the U.S. So I would look very closely at what is being done in that regard, because you might learn something there. If your economics work for char, and it becomes a prevalent solution for time release of your fertilizer, that's very scalable and interesting. And if it doesn't, because you have a whole bunch of externalities that doing it on a small scale kind of just takes care of, like free manure, for example, then that also gives you good direction that you're not going to be focusing on reducing 12% of anthropogenic CO2 emissions.
Feedback, Brook.
So, I go back to my first point. I've looked at some of these companies, and I think, again, it's an exciting idea. It's really hard to quantify the value to the farmer. That's the part where it's unclear. Some people can sell biochar at farmers markets, and there's some very early market data from home gardeners that want to apply this stuff. But what is it really worth? What is it displacing? What is the average small to medium scale commercial farmer willing to pay for this stuff? And that'll give you that critical feedback to what does your business model look like, and does a 50-gallon drum do it, or do you need to change the scale or the business model? So I think that's the first question you have to answer to know, what value are you creating by taking that biomass and turning it into biochar. But it's an interesting idea. I think there's a lot of different theses around how it works. Some think that it's a little, sort of a microcosm for bacteria that naturally can sequester nitrogen from the air. So understanding that mechanism and the real value creation, I think, would be step one. So.
Articulate, a good story. I think this whole issue you've already heard from my colleagues about, is this a couple of drums on a couple of farms initially, going to many small drums on many small farms in the developing world, or is there, in fact, some other business opportunity here? And the clearer you can be about that, I think the more compelling it will be. And if there's a fork in the road, explain it. And then lastly, I do think being clear about the syngas angle on this is important.
So I think for you to be successful, you actually have to think about how do you educate the farmers, because I think you work a lot with people that know necessarily what they do, and before you know it, they throw anything they can think of in that drum, and then they spread it out of their land. And I think that's always been my biggest concern with the biochar, that you don't fully understand the chemistry. There's a potential that chemistry makes things you don't want on your land, and if you do it, it's very difficult to remediate that. So think about, okay, how do you educate farmers to know what they do in there, and how much to apply, and how really to use it, and also make sure they don't forget about the nitrogen and think, oh, this is a fertilizer replacement. And as you scale, I think your personal attention to these things might lapse. So really stay on top on what are you trying to do. And I think the technology angle probably won't work that much in North America. But I think once you look at sort of biomass to energy type of place, I think in a sort of developing world, that might be another angle if you get your syngas to work and just scale that model up rather than go the biochar route.
Great advice. Nice job, Luke. Round of applause.
Thanks.
Well done.
Thank you, Luke. Next up, we have Brian Miranda of Aquicore.
Well, hi, my name is Brian Miranda, and I'm a student here, and today I'm from Aquicore. And so, well, every day I'm from Aquicore. But basically, today over 40 billion square feet of commercial property is completely excluded from, completely priced out of the commercial energy management market. And so mid-sized commercial buildings between 5,000 and 200,000 square feet cannot afford the $1 million contracts of high-end providers like Siemens, Schneider Electric.
But larger and more complex than residential buildings, these mid-sized buildings need hardware that's beyond the scope of software providers like Opower. And so unlike our competitors, Aquicore directly addresses the need of this massive mid-market. We are a one-stop hardware and software solution. We offer meters at 30% the cost of the industry standard, and we specialize in providing an energy dashboard that both reports and analyzes this data. So Aquicore is already installed in 4 buildings in the East Coast, and so in one of our first projects, we were able to help the owner of a 50,000 square foot building in DC identify an exterior floodlight that was pretty much zapping energy when no one was actually there. So during idle hours, this light was materially affecting the size of the utility bill. And so with Aquicore's real-time reporting and submetering capabilities, this owner was able to drill down 3 levels from the building level down to the circuit level to find out this problem. And so with this kind of price point and granularity, there's a lot of money to be saved. And so this spring, we're looking to move forward with over 9 million square feet in commercial property down the pipeline from projects, committed projects ranging from 7 government buildings in the city of DC to a 200,000 square foot mall in Jakarta, Indonesia. And so Aquicore actually derives revenue from 3 different streams. In each one of these projects, you have first the one-off installation fee. Second, you have a reoccurring revenue from the general subscription, which is managing and storing the data. And third, you have targeted client modules where they can pretty much choose certain data analysis features, and that contributes to their own benefits. And as we add more features and they choose more, we can easily scale that up and generate more revenue. And so, next slide, please. How are we different? I mentioned already that we're at 30% the price point of current sensors, but I think the biggest way for us to get into the market and generate a lot of revenue at scale is the fact that we are interoperable or vendor agnostic.
10
Basically, in 30 minutes or less, we can hook up to any meter already installed, even our competitors. And so with all the client benefits ranging from, we can see ourselves in every space. And so we've raised $300,000, and we're looking for $450,000 more. Thank you.
Okay, great. So Willem, question.
So why are your sensors so much cheaper than the competition?
Sure. So in one sense, we actually have 32 CT sensors as opposed to the traditional 4 in many of the buildings when we're putting in the meter itself in the circuit breaker. And so that way we're using fewer meters. And second, we are communicating directly to the cloud, and a lot of the current meters in place don't actually, they use older enterprise software, and it's the communication language and programming barriers that sort of make, you have to add extra steps in order to get the data from that meter to an online dashboard.
So how protectable is your idea? Do you have filed any IP on what you're doing, or can other people replicate it once they see what you figured out, how to bring the cost down?
At the moment, it can be replicated, but I think in this market, the market is so vast that, and a lot of it's on the real estate side too, it's really building trust in networks and getting out to scale first. And in this market, it's not really the meters itself that's most important, because those are going to become a commodity in the next 2 years or so. It's really the software side, and that's where we differentiate ourselves, and that's our core competency, where we really emphasize delivering certain value propositions to our clients and build around our entire dashboard around that.
Next question, Dan.
This is a competitive, I would have thought, a very competitive space. So if you were Honeywell or you were Opower and you were asked, why can't you serve that space somewhere in between, what would their answers be?
Sure. Well, Opower is definitely aggressively focusing on the residential side.
But they're talking about scaling up.
Right. In terms of Opower's strategy, I'm not too familiar with that, but I know they're expanding into Latin America, for example. They're proven that their model is very effective for residential homes, and why start going into something that's not their core competency when there's still more residential homes to explore and put their software in.
Speak into the microphone.
I'm sorry. And in terms of larger companies like Schneider Electric, Honeywell, they're making a lot of profit as it is now, and I don't think that they've realized how big this opportunity is yet. and they haven't been able to drop down their price point to what we're able to offer. And in terms of doing that, it will take them several years to do that.
Next question, Brook.
Why are your sensors cheaper? I didn't get that.
Okay, sure. So on one end, it's communicating the data from the sensors to the cloud, and so
How do you do that? What's the protocol that you use?
okay. So well, basically, the way the technology works is you install CT clamps onto the circuit breakers into the channels, and then that's connected down to our Aquicore meter, and from there it's wirelessly transmitted via either Ethernet or cable to the internet, and so using languages like Modbus and BACnet, things like that. I'm not entirely familiar with the specifics there. That's not my specialty in the company.
Okay, and then what's your sort of go-to-market strategy? Are you going to go direct to customers, each individual building, or why would someone like a building management system company, why would they partner with you?
Right. So there are many different strategies that we have. One is we're building out our partnership program. So our product is very effective for a number of energy service providers, from electrical contractors, mechanical contractors, and auditors, where, for example, in Jakarta, Indonesia, we have a big retrofitter who goes into a building, sees where he can make things more efficient, and then creates a performance contract. And so we can be the validator of his own savings. So we can provide a before baseline and then see after how much he's actually saved. And so in that sense, we're very useful for other companies and other third parties to do their own service. And so that's on one end, building out that partnership program. Second, at this moment, we're still trying to build out our sales pipeline. So it's a little bit less focused right now on how to, it's more in just getting projects right now. So for example, like next week, I have a demo with Google, and they've been piloting a number of dashboards in DC, the city of DC, especially with new policy measures to improve benchmarking and energy data collection for buildings. There are widespread efforts to really look at different dashboards, and from the main people we've talked to so far, ours is a lot better than what's out there.
Okay, let's take another question. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we'll get to feedback later, but can you, this is hugely competitive, and where a lot of these things fall down is in the economics and in the cost of sales. So a $100 sensor versus a $30 sensor doesn't matter at all if you have a $1,000 truck roll. Can you talk through the economics on the cost side and on the revenue monetization side?
Right. So in terms of getting that entry point, we find that for a lot of the smaller size buildings, utilities bills might not be the biggest thing for them at the moment. So just in terms of presenting the initial upfront installation cost and the time to do that, it takes 2 hours to have everything set up. It's very quick and easy to do that. And in terms of the economics, our prices are cheaper, and we make most of the money from the subscription revenue.
Who's going to drive a truck out there and put this thing in the building?
Sure. So this can be installed by any electrician, and we can just mail it. It's pretty easy to install. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
No, I mean, that's an answer. That's
Okay.
going to be interesting
Sure.
when you try that.
It's pretty simple to install. So,
question, John.
I guess my question is, what exactly are you going to measure and how often? Volts, power factor, current?
Sure.
All the above?
Right now we look at volts and current, and so we're measuring the electricity current real-time 24/7 and continuously monitoring that and reporting that to a dashboard, and they can look over trends and different analysis on that. So anything from energy intensity per square foot to dollar per square foot, et cetera.
And how long, as you're monitoring those variables, how long do you think it's going to take for you guys to really get up a good database of, say, condition monitoring signatures for if you're in a grocery store, you've got bad fan motors on or bad compressor motors, things that you can really turn into intrinsic value stories for your customers?
Right. So one thing that we do is look at working versus idle times. So we have a schedule of when things should be in operation. For example, the example I made with the exterior floodlight, they're able to see that that's during idle hours and should not be consuming that much electricity. And that was not, they weren't specifically looking for that, but that was something they found. And so that's one example, and that happened, I think, in the matter of a month. And so
And you can scale that to your other customers.
I'm sorry?
And you can scale that to your other customers quickly.
I believe so. In terms of just looking at your electricity consumption, you can really break it down to the circuit level and really see where things are above the benchmarks from the DOE and other EIA databases. And so we actually offer recommendations to other products from the EIA that are Energy Star approved.
Let's move right into the feedback. So go ahead, Willem. Feedback, takeaway, advice.
I think you just mentioned sort of partnering with retrofitters and things. I think the partnership model is probably a good way to enter the market versus go it alone. Because as soon as people see what you're doing and they got more resources than you do, it's difficult. Even if they like your dashboard now, it's difficult to protect and to sort of stay ahead with that. Whereas if you have smart partnerships where you offer something to people that is mutually beneficial, I think that might be a better strategy than go it alone.
More feedback, Dan?
Not the most important thing, but the name did not tell me anything. It sounded like a water technology or something.
I agree. Yep.
Second, I was not at all compelled by this being able to figure out that a floodlight had been left on. Strikes me as a fairly straightforward thing to determine, but maybe I'm not understanding the situation. Third, the relative value of this low-cost sensor versus the targeted analysis and recommendations in terms of the business model here. It sounds like the sensor is the real step forward here. Lots of people have been working on focused and targeted analysis and recommendations. And I don't know how big a piece of that is in your business model, because that's a fairly well-tread area. And lastly, I do definitely agree that the benchmarking policies, benchmarking requirements that are increasingly being put in place at the local, state, and federal level are could be a very important driver here.
Right. Feedback, Brook.
So focus is really important when you're an early stage company. You're biting off on a big chunk of this whole value proposition. You're going to be developing hardware. You're going to be going to the customer, acquiring the customer, installing and servicing it, and then providing this tail of service and dashboarding. Try to prioritize what you do best and focus there, and maybe don't bite off on the whole thing. You might have to do the whole thing initially to learn what you're best at, but if it's the sensor, figure out what that business model looks like, and maybe you do have to execute a few projects to show the value of your sensor, but then it's a sensor business, and that looks very different than this service business where you've got a lot of competition and a lot of just headwinds generally. So, be my advice.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yep. From what I understand, it seems like the technology is really pretty easy to replicate and not totally differentiated. So, that's not going to be your differentiation. Your differentiation is going to be how you figured out to build a better business here and how to and how to execute that and how to address a customer. So that's the game you're in. And it's incredibly competitive right now. So you've got 10 startups I can think of: Sci Energy, Building IQ, Enernoc, Griddium, Bidgely, O-Power, all doing this, all much better funded, all much further down the path. That's a huge risk, but it's also a huge opportunity because you can know all the mistakes they've made. Every customer you talk to has probably looked at 3 of those solutions, so you can know what works, what doesn't, and that's a very cheap way to get very fast learning. So my number one focus I would want to know backwards and forwards every competitor in the space, what they've done well, what's failed, and why, and have a real view on that. And beyond all the startups, the incumbents, I think are going to be a huge challenge for you. You talk about all of these mid-sized commercial building owners. They've all got a BMS, and they've got service contracts with guys like Trane, JCI Schneider. Those guys, you can't just send an electrician to go install something on their BMS because they've got a contract with Schneider, and Schneider's not going to let them do that, or they're going to avoid their service contract, and then they're going to sell them their solution, not your solution. So believe me, people have run into all of these issues, and they're big ones. So I would know the competition.
Advice, John.
I guess what I would do is I would try to run fast sort of through the level 1 diagnostics of, this floodlight's on, this floodlight's not on, to getting to really turn the data into real information for the customer that they can create value out of. So I used the words earlier, condition monitoring, right? if you can develop a unique database of signatures for all the different types of devices that a certain class of customers might have, that might give you an intrinsic value, some differentiation that you could use in the fight against the 7 or 8 competitors that are absolutely going to be there. I would add a company called Outsmart to the list that seems to be doing some stuff that's pretty similar as well.
Okay, nice job, Brian.
Thank you
Big
very
round
much.
of applause. Well done.
Okay, our last pitch of the night is Lyuba Wolf of EverCharge. Welcome up, Lyuba.
The inability to charge at home has been a real barrier to EV adoption among residents of multi-unit buildings with shared parking garages. Until now. With EverCharge is a hardware-enabled service that makes it possible for the first time for residents of condominiums and apartments to charge their electric vehicles at home. At the heart of our solution is our Power Manager. With timed multiplexing capability, this Power Manager makes it possible for multiple EVs to charge off of shared circuit breaker by taking turns charging throughout the night. The Power Manager also features RFID member authentication and reports usage data via cellular data network back to EverCharge for billing purposes. Unlike other technologies today, EverCharge makes charging installation in multi-unit residences with shared parking garages cost-effective. With EverCharge, a resident can charge their EV directly from common area electricity instead of having to run conduit from a dedicated meter to their parking spot. With the Power Managers optimizing existing electrical capacity, buildings can support charging many more EVs before costly upgrades are required. Taken in combination, these features enable a profitable service. Next slide, please. So how does this service model work? Essentially, just like EV owners in single-family homes, the EV owner will pay for their charging hardware and the installation. We will recoup the cost of the Power Manager through a one-time $300 member initiation fee. And then from then on, we'll have a recurring monthly revenue stream of averages around $80 a month, part of which will be used to reimburse the building's management for the common area electricity that was used. This results in a 50% gross margin for EverCharge. So the other important aspect of this business model is that we manage this entire installation process and serve the charging at no cost to the property managers. And this is significant because what this means is that now they can, it makes it much easier for the property managers to approve EV charging requests. And that has basically enabled condominiums and apartment residents to be able to charge their EVs at home. And I'm happy to report that we're already making a difference. EverCharge is the preferred provider for Tesla Motors, and we're already helping Tesla customers with their charging installations in multi-unit residences. This is actually a picture of one of our first Model S customers, and we're putting in 2 more Model S. We're helping 2 more Model S people charge in Napa later next week. So we're already making progress there. And just on a personal note, I come to EverCharge after 3 years of Tesla Motors, where I saw firsthand the challenges faced by aspiring EV owners who couldn't have the car of their dreams just because of the kind of building they live in. And so I think with EverCharge, by serving this untapped market, we have an opportunity to make EV ownership possible for everyone. So thank you.
Okay, so go ahead, John.
Question. I was just going to ask, could you describe a little bit about how this scales? How many maximum cars per circuit breaker, and just being realistic, right? I mean, on a common service for a typical, is there going to be 200 amps available so you can do 6 times 4, or how does the math work for how many cars you can get?
Sure. And of course, the answer really is in the type of EVs that you're charging. So a Tesla can charge at 40 amps. So then it could recoup twice as much electricity in 1 hour as a Leaf. The way we look at it is most people drive around 30 miles a day. So that for a Tesla, you can recoup that in about 2 hours of charging. For a Nissan Leaf, maybe a little bit more. And so if you have 10 hours over the night, we would basically make it so that everybody could be guaranteed those 2 hours of charging and to recoup their average daily commute. Now, I'm not saying this is perfect, but it beats not having access at all to charging at home. And so it'll at least solve for 90% of the cases those people might
And your
have.
device basically is a contactor. You're not modulating the flow.
There's no
It's either on or
throttling
off.
here. It's literally just your turn, now it's your turn, now it's your turn. So it's very simple. And I think that with time, as regulations change and as we develop our product, that throttling could become more of a picture. But for now, we can just simply time multiplex.
Next question, Ryan.
I don't have any questions.
Next question, Brook.
I mean, that's basically my question too. If you're, just with your example here, if you have three EVs that can now charge instead of one, that sounds great. But if, my car, I have an EV, takes 4 to 7 hours to charge. So if I have to share that with 3 others, now my time is sort of 12 to 21 hours to charge, which kind of throws off my use case.
Yeah, so the use case is based on average commute, which is 30 miles a day. And like I said, it's not perfect, but it meets 99% of people's needs. Of course, you'll still have...
I'm not fully discharged every day, so
Exactly.
That's your point.
Exactly.
Okay. And is 50 amps the common circuit breaker in parking garages of multi-unit complexes?
It's one of them. There could be 100 amps as well. Capacity is actually usually for the whole building is measured in kilowatts, but you also have to consider the circuit. So that was more of an illustrative example. So every building is different, but it's reasonable to assume that you could have a 50 amp circuit. Cause that's like the dryer plug or like regular 240 NEMA 1450 plug.
Next question, Dan. Go ahead.
Greater than 50% gross margins, that's attractive. So I guess the question is, what about competitors?
So far, nobody has done this. Most of the competitors have been focused on public charging. You could argue whether that was smart or because there were a lot of federal dollars thrown at it. I personally believe that home charging is really what's critical, maybe workplace, and actually see an application of this in the workplace as well. So nobody has been doing it before, and I'm not exactly sure why, if it was because they didn't understand the need accurately. I think it's a really compelling opportunity because it's where people are going to spend most of the time charging, and they're going to be more inclined to pay a premium for that charging because it's where they need it, as opposed to 15 minutes in front of Walgreens. That's not really going to give me much miles, and I don't really need that anyway. So I think that I don't know why other competitors haven't done it. I would hope that we were really wildly successful and a company like ChargePoint or somebody else buys us and combines us with their public network.
Do you have IP? I mean, is it?
Yes, there are patents pending, both in the US and Europe, for the application of time multiplexing for this particular context.
Okay. Next question. Go ahead, Dan.
So I think it was referred to like if you you max out with 3 or 4 cars because otherwise you're going to run out of hours, and then is the cost that prohibitive that you can't just buy your own one if you can afford a Tesla?
That you can't buy your own what?
Your own charger?
Oh, okay. So it's not the charger that we're buying. The problem is you have limited capacity in a building, and actually electrical upgrades can cost $10,000 to $15,000. In addition, if you aren't able to use the common area electricity, sometimes the solution could be that your management will say, well, you have to buy your own meter, and that's also expensive. Like the whole thing, we've had evaluations about how much it would cost to install ours versus without our system, and it was a difference between $15,000 and $3,000. So it actually is quite expensive if you can even get the homeowners association to even agree to let you do it. And the reason why the homeowners association needs our model is because they can't tell one person you can charge and take up capacity if they don't have a scalable way to then say, we have a plan for when 3, 4, 5, 10 people want capacity. And yes, you will eventually have to have upgrades, but the point is you can extend that over more cars.
Okay, so we're going to move swiftly into our last round of feedback. So John, if you'd like to start.
I guess my only feedback here is I would be really clear about what the alternatives are. I think you just heard one of them, and you have an argument, but if it was me, I'd be thinking about how can I connect an outlet near my car back to my breaker panel for my apartment, and is that cheaper than the initiation fee and the rest? And maybe some places it is, a lot of places it won't be, I don't know. The only other thing I'd ask you to think about is revenue grade metering, because ultimately you're going to be charging people for power here, right? So can you do that? Anyway.
Feedback, Ryan.
Yep. I mean, I think it's a pretty clever idea. And having IP is critical, so you're going to have a big value inflection point on whether or not those things issue or are likely to issue. So that's important. One thing I think from a presentation perspective you did extremely well was, you had a work experience where you saw a whole bunch of customers and their needs and their pain points and mentioned that. It's great that you mentioned that. I would play that up a lot. I mean, it's very important that this is something that you really have experienced and you have a kind of very in-depth understanding of what the real issues are and why this is the right solution. And that's extremely compelling.
Advice, Brook.
So I really want to know the analysis of the market and the existing buildings, what's the average size, what's the average infrastructure that's available, and really dissect that, because you won't be able to do this in every building, right? So try to take the big market and dissect that down to buildings where you have a unique value proposition where you couldn't otherwise have everyone install their own charger, and you can uniquely address it, and the value proposition's there where you don't need an upgrade. Carve that world down and say how big that market is, and that would be, I think, a great way to just focus your attention in the right markets. But if you do have IP, it could be interesting, and we're investors in ChargePoint, so I'll pass this on. But the other piece of advice I would have is just on the business model. A lot of those installations don't actually work on the value proposition of selling electricity for charging the vehicle. It's a whole different value proposition. So hopefully the economics pencil out, but I'd just love to dig into that more.
Okay, takeaway advice, Dan?
I think it's a smart market to be going after, this multifamily, because it really is an issue for people wanting to buy EVs. It's easy to do it if you own your own home, but it's pretty challenging. So I think you're onto something important. I'd want to know more about utility rate structures and how all this will vary, utility to utility, and the impacts of that, particularly with this charging regime that you've got. And then I think, in terms of marketing, the apartment building owners, there's probably a way to get out there, and instead of having to do this building by building, to do it in a, many at a time, because ultimately that'll be a smarter way to move forward.
Happy to tell you about that afterwards.
Last piece of feedback for the last.
So it's obviously in California where people really think, electric car is coming, sort of, and we need to solve these issues. So, but really, just to think about, how quickly and how many electric cars are there going to be. I was just thinking maybe you're sort of highlighting, well, plug-in hybrids. It might be sort of an intermediate solution that needs less charging, and people are more likely to live in multi-unit communities. Sort of linking up with other options as well, and see, how can you grow sort of until there are enough electric vehicles to have sustainable grow business.
Great feedback. You. Well done, Lyuba. Round of applause.
Thank you, Lyuba. Okay, so that was all 8 pitches for tonight, all the feedback, all the Q&A. Now it's your turn. So you all should have received an email from me about 45 minutes ago, at least everybody that registered online in advance. So check your email. And if you did not happen to get that by any chance, you can type in the URL above, and you'll get to the exact same voting form. We'll talk about the Future Energy Program for the rest of 2013. So if you happen to have a startup that you would like to present here on stage at one of our panels or one of our events, you can present in New York on Thursday, June 13th. That's the next one that's coming up. Also, we are going to be prototyping a a purely virtual, purely online pitch event format a little later this year and this spring. That's going to be focused on international startups only, so companies that are not based in the US. That's going to be in June, not sure exactly the date. Then our second half of the year schedule is we'll be back in Boston in September, here in Silicon Valley in October, and in New York in November. So if you have a startup that you would like to present, find us online, Future Energy, and you can apply to pitch there. Chris, you want to talk about the prizes?
Sure. I guess while people are still getting their votes in, just a reminder of the prizes that the companies are competing for tonight. So it's a complimentary application to Clean Tech Open. Clean Tech Open is the nation's largest accelerator program. Also Surge, based in Houston. So a great interview, a great opportunity to interview with Surge Accelerator, and then $1,000 worth of Amazon Web Services credits, which could come in handy. And
fantastic. This is where we'll all be going for drinks afterwards, so I hope you can stick around. Anybody still voting as of right now? The URL again. That stands for ULS, ultralightstartups.bz, and shortly. All right. Here's the winners. Lyuba Wolf of EverCharge, first place. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Second place, it looks like Luke of Reicher. And third place, Aaswath Raman of radCool, right? That's it. Yep. All right, come back on stage. All of you guys that are winners, come on back.
Come on back.
And the winner of the biggest prize, really, which is the best panelist, as voted by you guys.
On the edge of their seats.
is, I happen to see, Brook Porter of Kleiner, Perkins, Caufield, and Byers. Congratulations, Brook.
Well done.
That's funny. Winner of Eternal Gratitude. Okay, so the last slide is going to be Ray's Grill. So I hope you can all join us over there. It's a 10-minute walk away from here. Thanks again to Stanford and the Stanford Energy Club and Amit Desai, President, for hosting us here tonight. And congratulations to all the winners.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll see you shortly.